Hey guys, welcome back. RPG Day 2021, day 28. And today's prompt keyword is solo. And I'm going to touch on something that I have mentioned in other vids. But as it's appropriate to the relevant word, I think it makes sense. I'll kind of go through the first little bit quickly though, because it has been repeated so many times. So, a few days ago, in one of my RPG Day 2021 vids, I talked about a certain book, which I have here in front of me, still from that day, entitled What is Dungeons & Dragons? As I said in that video, back when I was about, I don't know, 8, 9, and we were getting ready to move house, Mum found this in a shop, thought, oh, dragons, he'll like dragons, and bought me that, not really knowing what it was. And it opened my eyes to a whole new world. But it was obviously something I couldn't do at that age. You can't just up and go to a game store or join a games club or look for other people who play. Once we did move, to keep me occupied, they bought me, Mum and Dad bought me, a couple of the Fighting Fantasy game books by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, the co-creators of Games Workshop. Specifically, I had Death Trap Dungeon and I think Island of the Lizard King, which was book 6 and 7. And these were solo play fantasy game books, but the best sort of game books. You know, I tried many over the years, but and once again I fell in love, and I collected all these up until probably somewhere around about the 30s or 40s. I don't know how many books they did after that. And I used to sit there and I would play these over and over again. Sometimes I would keep the same stats, same equipment, and go from book 1 to book 2 to book 3 and so on, playing the same character. Because I'm kind of sad like that when I was a kid. And I enjoyed solo, probably, because the story's in there, and in your head, like with reading a novel, it's something different. It's something where your imagination really takes the front seat. Role-playing games as a whole are a group thing. You need your players, and you need a GM, and you bounce off one another to make the games good. When I first started role-playing back in 1987 with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, they had a campaign called The Enemy Within, and that was also the title of the first book in that series. And I think when I got into it, there was 2 books. It was the first 2 books, Enemy Within and Shadows over Bogenhafen. And I wanted to run this at some point, but I didn't really have the experience. I used to run the game as a one-on-one with my brother-in-law at the time. He was in his 30s, I was late teens. But one of the things that I did to sort of prepare myself was to run the scenario, the campaign, solo. I rolled up 4 characters. I remember in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay you had 4 career paths. You were a warrior, a ranger, a rogue, or an academic, and there was a load of professions for each of those. And in my head, I would run the story. I'd be sitting there in total silence while Mum and Dad were doing whatever in the living room or the kitchen, and I'd be sitting there rolling dice, changing the character sheets, wounding, hit points, blah 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 blah. And I would actually run that campaign in my head for these 4 characters. So I knew what I was getting into. And I remember doing the same thing actually for Call of Cthulhu as well. before I ran anything for that, I would create a character, just a single character, and try and run it through. I haven't done that since early 90s. The closest I have come since then is I have rolled up a character using the Hero Lab on a laptop. And some of you might think this is a bit silly, but I kind of enjoyed it as a getaway, as something different when I was bored or whatever. And basically, I would use a list I had of all the creatures in Pathfinder, and whichever one matched my level roughly, I would put it up against my character. And as the character, I would do what I would do in that role, and as the monster, I would do what the GM would have that creature do in that situation. And when I defeated it, if I defeated it, I would use ultimate equipment to roll for the treasure, and I would increase my own character by the appropriate XP. I would get the gold. I would spend money, sell any treasure, and I would just kind of do these sort of like test monsters out. I haven't done that for a good few years either. My point, I suppose, is that even though role-playing is a community-orientated game, hobby, it's still possible to do things solo. That idea of running a set of characters in your head through an adventure or a campaign, as I described, is probably not a bad idea sometimes, especially if you're new to the hobby. And it kind of gives you an idea of how you might describe things. I mean, I can run stuff in my head and it sounds great. When I come to try and say it in a game session or in a YouTube vid, it never comes out quite the same way. So I guess what I'm saying is it's still possible to get some sort of enjoyment out of the game, solo adventures, running characters through it just to see how a scenario campaign would work, even using that to test character builds. There's always something you can do with just yourself in your hobby to prepare yourself as a GM, and sometimes even as a player. I think you can do these test fights if you've got something like Hero Lab and the Monster Manual or the Bestiary or whatever, to see how you or a party could take something on, and it gives you sort of strategic ideas and the like. Anyway, before I start to waffle once more, thank you for watching, guys. It's just a shortish little vid, I guess. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. I'd be interested to see your thoughts on this. Do you do anything like that in a solo perspective with just yourself? If so, post in the comments below and we'll see what sort of discussion we can get. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Good gaming.